Jeremy, Michael, thank you for coming and talking all things lobster rolls. I'm just going to dive in. What was the first lobster roll you guys remember eating?
Oh, tough.
Go way back in time.
Question. right off the bat. First lobster roll had to be somewhere here in New England, somewhere. So I moved here probably around 18 years ago, and I was with my brother. So when we came to Boston, we wanted to eat all the local stuff. So we want to get fried clams and oysters and lobster, of course. So I'm sure it was somewhere on the North Shore at, a clam shack.
How about you, Jeremy?
I have a much more romantic story.
All right.
My,
yes.
first
Take us
lobster roll.
there.
Yeah.
Take us there.
Let's lower the lights. No. My family are still lobstermen in Maine, and we had a big lobster cookout. And the next day, my aunt what didn't get eaten, my aunt and grandmother would pick the lobster meat, what was left, and we'd have lobster rolls for lunch. And I very vividly remember eating my first lobster roll. They mixed it with mayonnaise and celery salt, and eating and they put it in a hot dog bun, which kind of surprised me. I was like, "What is this?" That was my first lobster roll. It was a day after a lobster bake.
Well, that sounds amazing. What are the qualities of good lobster rolls?
Number one, your lobster, obviously. That's the main draw. So, obviously fresh lobster. For us, we only use fresh. Some places will use frozen, but the texture is obviously not as good. Your mix. So depending if you like cold with mayo, hot with butter, and your bread. It's pretty simple, but being fresh, the quality of your bread, toasting your bread, small detail stuff, but it's actually a very simple thing to make, but it's an easy thing to mess up as well.
Yes.
Yeah, it has to be simple. I think everyone has something to compare it to, so you have to kind of work within a certain range of what a lobster roll is. I think when people try to get too fancy, it's never as good as people think it's going to be. So really straightforward, super fresh lobster. That's the most important thing. Quality bun, all those things are really important. But I think where people fail at lobster rolls is when you overthink it, you do too much. Keep it simple.
Do you think there can be any room for innovation? I've seen some recipes that have browned butter, maybe kimchi, avocado. I don't know.
I think we're in the same boat. Like a plain lobster roll is the best lobster
Keep it simple.
Yeah,
Keep it simple.
There should be no kimchi in lobster rolls.
Yeah, that is not a lobster roll.
Okay, fair. So if you guys were ever going to a restaurant, are there any signs that somebody sets their lobster roll down in front of you, you see this thing, and you're like, I got to get out of here. I don't know if it's lettuce on a bun. Maybe it's the kimchi. I don't know.
I think that it's just got to be abundant, right? It's got to look plump and fresh, and big pieces of lobster that feel like that looks really cool. Someone put some effort into that. I think it can't be overdressed with mayonnaise or anything like that. It's just you still need to see that lobster. It's just got to look and feel vibrant and fresh and plump and bright and all those things. So that's really important. If that lobster roll gets put down in front of you, you want to grab it. That's the key right there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Obviously, being lobster's very expensive. Everybody knows that, right? If you go to the store and buy lobster meat or buy whole lobsters, it's expensive, and it's hard as a restaurateur to be very generous with something that's so expensive, so perishable. But when you go to a place, if I go to Row 34 and I get a lobster roll, I'm like, this is a nice lobster roll. They toast the bun's beautiful. The lobster's generous. Same thing at our places. We give way more lobster than, we technically, quote unquote, should. And I think that really ends up with that feeling of this is abundant and generous and appealing. When you get it, you're like, yes.
Don't look for cheap lobster roll.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to the cost of it later. But I'm not a New Englander. So when I first moved here and I had my first lobster roll and I found out about Connecticut versus Maine style, I was like, what is this? So what is it?
Well, a traditional kind of Maine lobster roll is, and again, every household on the coast from, Kittery up to Machias along the coast, all those lobstering families, everyone kind of has their own little maybe spin on it. But a traditional Maine lobster roll is basically lobster, mayonnaise, maybe a little celery. My family always puts celery salt in it, a little fresh lemon, kind of stops there. How we make it in the restaurants is we put chopped dill pickle in it. That's my grandmother made it that way. My mother still argues about it, even though my grandmother's long past.
That's almost kimchi.
Yeah, it's almost kimchi. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
But she made dill pickles and chopped them up and put them in, and they're pretty good. So that a pretty traditional lobster rolls, mayonnaise, celery, salt, lemon. You could kind of stop there and then
Cold?
Oh yeah, that's cold. The Connecticut is just warm butter, so it's the same toasted bun. How we make it is we just drop lobster in straight butter and melted butter and warm it all the way through. Still it just soaks up all that butter, and then you put it in the toasted bun and close your eyes and hope you don't have a heart attack as you're eating it.
That sounds pretty good. So I guess I want to go back outside of lobster. How did you guys get interested in cooking?
So I grew up sort of like your son. I grew up, my dad was a chef, and my grandfather and my uncle and my other uncle. So I kind of grew up in restaurants or adjacent to restaurants or catering, from a very small age, and it was sort of always around. So my grandfather was doing caterings, and my dad was working in restaurants, and they had another catering business. And, I remember being 5 years old and like making breadcrumbs in a RoboCoupe at a catering kitchen somewhere in Florida. It was just sort of like the family craft, and you sort of were attracted to that and got into it. I started family business.
Yeah, I grew up in a family that cooked. Like everyone cooked. Food was always a kind of a big part of what we did. Like a lot of chefs grew up in that environment. My parents owned a small cafe when I was like in middle school. It was like a weekend place, breakfast and lunch. My sisters worked there. I washed dishes there sometimes, and so that was like I got a little bit of a taste for it. And then, just I barely got through high school. Thought I was going to play sports, didn't play sports. And my dad's like, you got to do something with your life. And I was working at my brother-in-law's bakery at the time. I'm like, well, I'm going to do this. This is fun. And I went to culinary school. And day one, I was like, this is it. This is what I'm doing for the rest of my life. And I just, once it clicked for me, it clicked for me. And, I've been doing it since I was 18 and I've loved it ever since. So, and it's a hard business. So if you don't love it, like, don't do it. There's lots of better ways to waste your time than in a kitchen.
And I know fishing is also in your family. You brought a couple photos to share with us. Can we put those up?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so tell us who's in this photo.
So my dad's family is from York, Maine. That's my grandfather, and my dad is a teenager. And my grandfather was one of the first lobstermen out of York Harbor. If you're familiar with Maine, York's only about a little over an hour from here, southern coast of Maine. And he, in the 1940s, started fishing lobster. He worked at the Portsmouth Naval Yard. Back then, York, Maine was incredibly different. It might have, compared to an urban area, that York might have been Mars. It was, there was nothing up there. And so he worked in the Naval Yard. He tried to join the Army. He had flat feet. He couldn't, during World War II, he couldn't go in the Army. And him and a buddy found out that there was somebody buying lobsters, and they figured out a way to go out and catch them. So him and his friend started in the 1940s catching lobsters. And he just kept doing it. And my dad did it as a teenager growing up. Obviously, there he is. My dad's brother, my uncle, was a lobsterman well into his 80s. He was more part-time. He had a traditional job, and then in the summer when he got home from work, he would lobster in the summer. So it was, and then to this day, my cousin, my nephew catch almost every lobster that we serve in the restaurants. They're full-time lobstermen in York, Maine. We drive to the dock 3 days a week, pick up lobsters for my family, bring them back, and almost every lobster we serve are caught by my cousins or my nephew. And it's amazing. I mean, it's, we kind of take it for granted in the restaurants as we think about it, but it's pretty unique. But it also gave me a really different perspective on food of kind of growing up with a family of like how, I was one of the younger grandchildren. So by the time I came along, when we'd have the big family barbecues, my grandfather would not eat lobster. He only ate hot dogs. and the reason is there was many years where all they had to eat was lobster because that's what they caught. There was, during the Depression, and him and my dad and my uncle would go and spear a flounder in the river and catch lobster, and that's what they ate. So by the time I came along, it was hot dogs. That was about all he ate. I don't blame him.
Lobster.
But I was like, these are great. Why don't you want lobster? And I'm just shoveling it in. But it gave you a real perspective on the industry, certainly.
Yeah, the work that it took to catch that lobster.
Yeah, and I spent my summers as a kid working on those boats sometimes, and I during this process of like figuring out what I was going to do with my life, I told my dad, I'm like, I'm going to go be a lobsterman. And the blood just ran out of his face. Like he was like, "Oh no, you're not." Like he watched his dad struggle, and it was still to this day. Like you want to go work hard, like go catch fish or lobster for a living. That's about as hard as it gets. So he called my older cousin, cousin Mark. If you've been to Road 34, and had lobster, you've eaten cousin Mark's lobster. And I, in February vacation from high school, I was a junior in high school, and I got to go spend the week in Maine. And I went lobstering with Mark in the winter, and I was cured instantly of ever wanting to be a lobsterman. So I was like, I'll stand on my feet all day in a kitchen. That's much more fun. So
And warmer.
yeah, it was warm.
Right. Yeah. Any crazy stories from going lobstering or any tales passed down from your grandpa?
Yeah, there's a million. It's it's a really competitive job, and tensions can run high, and I remember being like 15, 16, and we were about 3-4 miles out to sea on my cousin's boat, and we pulled up to another boat, which was kind of common, and he looked at me and said, "Hold on," and I held on to the other boat, and he jumped on the other boat and beat the crap out of the guy. And the reason he'd done that, that lobsterman was cutting his gear, and so when lobstermen are kind of fighting over territory, it's a hard way to make a living. They would cut each other's gear, so you would take the rope and you'd cut it, and you couldn't find your trap, and it's very expensive. So when there's conflict over territory, sometimes these things would happen. It doesn't happen as much as back then. There's cameras and wardens more so now than there was. So I was like, oh my God, So
This is a real rough
this
industry
was like I was
in
like,
more
yeah,
ways than one.
yeah, I'm not gonna do that anymore. But it is. Being out in storms, my cousin's capsized. He's been in the water waiting to be rescued. He's rescued people. I haven't ever been in those situations, but certainly the family stories over the years. There's been storms where my grandfather lost almost every trap that he had, where a storm wipes him out. So it's a really, really hard way to make a living.
Yeah, and I imagine I want to go back a little bit to the time where lobster was kind of seen as a food for the poor. And it was, fed to pigs and used as fertilizer. How did we get from that to now where it's this dish that is kind of like a luxury item for some people?
I think it's probably supply and demand sort of thing, where it was, very, very available. And, probably over the years of, catching lobster and harvesting them and bigger demand, it started to deplete the population, I'm sure. And I'm guessing that lobstermen see this now, but they, that becoming a luxury item, probably in a 30, 40 year period, is kind of wild. And now the amount of work that, lobstermen are doing to actually catch lobsters and the seasons and whatnot, really the price point thing is a huge thing now.
Yeah. Canning was a big help to the industry. So when canning was established in like the 40s, 50s, 60s, where canning became a thing, railroads, you could transport lobster, you can it and transport it. They created more markets for it. And then there's a story that it was actually fed to Teddy Roosevelt at at a fancy hotel in New York. They'd made lobster stew for staff meal because lobsters used to be fed to prisoners. It was a common food in the colonies because it was so cheap and it was so available. It was considered inhumane to feed the prisoners lobsters more than 3 times a week. And there's I don't know if it's true or not, but they said Teddy Roosevelt was fed the staff meal of lobster stew and loved it, so they put it on the menu. And during that era, lobster started to blossom. But canning and the railroad were really where it got introduced to the rest of the country.
And so how do we go from that to our lobster roll? Who put it on a bun?
I don't know, but that guy was genius. You know?
Like, let's take this and pick all this little tiny meat out of here. Yeah.
I have no idea who the origins of a lobster roll.
No, same.
It
is the best way to eat a lobster.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, it's fun to pick it apart and all that, but like to get a lobster, like all the meat ready to go, either warm or chilled already, and it's like
You don't have to boil it and see that sad part of it.
yeah, it's fun to crack a lobster open and like
Yeah.
do a lobster lobster boil, like lobster bake like that, but I don't know, lobster roll is just like the fastest, best vessel.
Yeah, I don't know. I would love to shake that guy's hand or whatever it was.
I was listening to a podcast preparing for this event, and I don't know how factual this was, but they said it was like a drunk guy going into like a little restaurant, just like, I want to be able to eat my lobster in the car as I drive home, so give it to me.
Drive
Well,
home
then
drunk.
I guess I am.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and I have a quick note here. It says, while some historians believe there's no one to be accredited with inventing the roll, most people believe that it originated at Perry's, a restaurant in Milford, Connecticut.
Okay.
So, interesting.
Etiquette. Surprising.
Yeah.
So that's still
Connecticut
New England.
style. Yeah.
Barely.
Barely. Uh-oh. Hopefully no one here from Connecticut. Uh-oh.
Well, it's okay. We love
I have
Connecticut.
to fight later.
Stonington, anyone?
So I want you guys to name some names. Aside from your own restaurants, where are your favorite rolls from?
I mean, Reds and with Cass at Maine, if you've ever been there. Anyone been there? And I mean, it's that is the quintessential like place to eat a lobster roll. It's on the water. You come across the bridge. Like, and that is part of why it tastes so good is it's environmental, right? Like you're at a picnic table, you're sitting outside, it's a summer day. There's a line like that's a great lobster roll as much as the environment is a lobster roll. Bob's Clam Hunt and Kittery, I think, does a great roll.
Just went there
Yeah,
last week.
yeah, they're great. Neptune here in town does a great roll. Any of Michael's restaurants, like there's lots of
Many
great
lobster
rolls.
rolls. What about you, Michael?
Obviously, all 4 row 34s. Soon to be 5. So, for like a very, very simple, like surprisingly better than it should be, there's like an ice cream shop next to Good Harbor Beach, and they have like pizza, and they also make lobster rolls, and they like toast the bun up nice, and it's cheap. And I was like, wow, and you're at the beach, and you go there after, and you're like, this is pretty good. I have no idea what that place is called, but it's great. I also really like the opposite of that, like Crew in Nantucket. Their lobster rolls amazing, but you're also like in Nantucket looking at the water, eating oysters. Like it's hard to catch that same vibe of like Bob's in Kittery or whatever, like when you're in Maine somewhere, to capture that in the city and be in an urban environment, and like there's something different about it. But people come to Boston and they want to eat lobster if you're not from here. But it's not the same as going to Maine and eating it on a picnic table, looking at the water, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, lobster rolls can have a nostalgia to them. Like if you grew up going to the coast or going up to Maine with your family or wherever in New England and stopping at your favorite clam shack and getting a lobster roll, like that's part of the experience that makes that food so unique. Is, I always say everyone remembers their first oyster, and most people do, but you kind of remember your, first lobster roll, your favorite lobster roll, like wherever, Bob's in Kittery or Reds, like those are places you're like, oh, I had a lobster roll there, and it was so great. And it was so great because you were looking at the water, sitting outside on the picnic table.
I think it's like barbecue. Like you don't want to eat barbecue like in an urban environment in the city. You want to eat it in like a parking lot in Texas. Yeah. Like, and then I'm like, that sounds good. Like I want to eat some guy's truck and like, like eat some brisket. Like I don't really want to be in like an apartment building, So that has something of that. Like the environment's very important, and I think there's certain foods where that matters more.
Yeah, my first lobster roll was in Maine. I don't remember the name of it, but we had been on the beach all day. Then we found this beautiful like little setup. Then they had the roll. It was, the nostalgia of it really matters. So we have a couple audience questions here before I get to some fun videos. What makes lobster meat more or less sweet?
Well, I'll give you theories.
Okay, we're open to theories here.
This time of year, lobster prices are going up. The reason they're going up is there is the biggest demand of the year. Is now, right? Summertime. Everyone's going up the coast. All the clam shacks are open. Everyone wants a lobster roll. Well, lobsters are shedding, so they are replacing their shells as the water gets warmer in the summer, midsummer, which we are now. They stop moving around. They find a hole and they shed their shell, and they grow a new shell on as they're shedding the old one. Well, they're called soft shells. So soft shells are great, but there's not as much meat in them. They don't catch as many because they're not moving around as much. But they say the soft shells are sweeter. That is what I grew up being told. If you blindfolded me and fed me a lobster, a hard shell in January and a soft shell in the summer, I don't know. But the theory is the summer lobsters are sweeter because of the soft shells. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But that's a great theory.
Yeah, I think so. Like the soft shell, hard shell thing, it's like your yield on lobster. So 1 pound of lobster whole gives you around 4 ounces of meat. So a 2 pound lobster, you get maybe 8 ounces of meat out of that. Maybe. Once it's soft shell, maybe it's 6 ounces of meat. So if you think of that, like your price is like everyone wants to eat lobster, and your 4 pounds of lobster actually gives you less meat. So once you start to add up and look like what a restaurant would be using, if you're using 20 pounds, 30 pounds, 40 pounds, 100 pounds of lobster meat, you need a lot of lobsters, and everybody wants them at the same time. And so the price thing is a huge issue for restaurants or clam shacks or anyone, or, people buying lobster at the store. But it has something to do with the season and catching and, winter and all that stuff. So, yeah. But sweeter, I don't know. Same guess. Like maybe it's sweeter because it's warm outside and you're like at the beach and you're like, this is so good.
This cold roll is very refreshing.
Yes.
Who knows? So my colleague Candace Springer, she's the associate director here at CitySpace. She's been on a journey to find the best lobster roll. She recently visited both of your establishments, and she made some videos for us because she couldn't be here tonight. So we're going to hear her thoughts in this first video on the hot and cold rolls from row 34.
You know that this is my preferred style of roll.
As is mine.
Classic cold.
Classic cold. We've got some chunks of veggies up in here. You don't always see that in a classic
just
cold.
flecks of celery, not like a egregious...
Some onion, too. A little red onion.
Well,
in
that's
there.
fine, but there's no lettuce. No.
Exactly. We
That's
are both
like immediate
lettuce haters.
disqualification. Okay.
All right.
Yes. That's what I call a bite.
Mm.
Ooh.
Second
Going back
bite.
in for a little more bun. And how are you feeling right now? Now you're contrasting and comparing with the hot butter. We're slapping
She's
the
tearing
table.
up right now.
I mean,
Didn't
I
do
think
that on round one.
I'm still a classic cold girly.
Yeah.
I know everybody loves the hot buttered, and it is fantastic. And if it was the only option, it would be a great option. This
Yeah.
is bomb.
So very loved it. Can't wait to tell her about the pickles when she gets back. Maybe she picked up on that. Okay, so next up, Little Whale. Let's have a look.
Okay, so when we were at row 34, we had a debate about which is better, hot versus cold lobster rolls. Now, the bestie I was with at row 34 is a cold girly like me. The bestie I'm with today tends to like the warm one. I just tried the warm one. It is delicious. It's so good. But I have a feeling that this is my bestie boo right here. So we're going to try that. Also, shout out to the grill lines. I have never seen that on a bun before. Have you ever seen that on a bun before?
Never.
That's crazy, though.
Cute though.
Aesthetics. Let me wipe off my face so I don't look like a fiend. Wow, that is delicious. Creamy. The chives are delicious. Lots of lemon in here. Oh my gosh, this is the one. Listen, warm lobster roll fans, you're not right. Cold is best.
So Candace clearly has strong opinions on hot versus cold. While we digest those thoughts, we're gonna.
They both have their place, but one is better.
We We sell 2-to-1 hot to cold. We
Same,
sell far
same.
more hot than we do cold.
Same.
That's
Yep.
crazy.
Yeah.
We're going to pull up some photos real quick just so we can see the hot cold comparison of row 34 first and then Little Whale over here. Beautiful. So hungry. And as Candace said, the grill marks on the bun. That's pretty impressive. Very beautiful. So how did you guys develop these recipes? We've gotten a little hint at the family history to yours, but I'm just curious, when you guys opened your restaurants, what did you think of when you were designing these?
I mean, you can't even really call it a recipe. It's like Hellman's mayo, lobster, salt. So, I mean, you know, I worked previously at another place that is very well known for their lobster rolls. And you know, the warm buttered lobster roll kind of, I don't know if that was like super a thing here like 20 years ago, and it's become like a phenomenon where that is now 2-to-1. People want warm buttered lobster roll versus a cold, but the cold is like, I think, more traditional, or what I think of as more traditional. So, you know, like the warm lobster roll that we have is lobster warmed up in butter, salt on a toasted brioche bun. And the cold is mayo, salt, chives on the top. So very, very simple. Like, I'm in the same boat as Jeremy. I'm like, there should be less stuff on it as possible. Like, celery's good, celery salt. Dill pickles is okay too.
Great. No
Hey,
kimchi.
they work great. But like, really, like, you know, look at the like, they have beautiful bread, right? They spend time on it. They toast the bread. Their lobster's fresh. Like, this is a really simple thing to make. Like, you can make this at home. It's going to cost you more than going out to the restaurant to make it. But you know, it's something where you're really not even focused. It's not a recipe necessarily. It's a sourcing and quality and making sure it's fresh and making sure your bread's fresh and, you know, your lobster's obviously coming in every day or whatnot. So yeah, it's something where you're like, small detail things makes like a good cheeseburger. And it doesn't mean it's like anything mind blowing, but a lobster roll is like really pared down. So
Yeah, one thing we do that I think is a little bit unique is we cook and clean every lobster. So our Seaport restaurant, we do about 2,000 pounds of whole lobster a week, every week. And the other restaurants combined kind of almost match that. So we're doing, you know, 4,000 pounds, 3,500 to 4,000 pounds a week of whole lobster. Literally driving to Maine, putting live lobster on a truck, driving it back to the restaurants. The guy's cleaning the lobster, cooking it, taking it out of the shell. That poor guy. And that genuinely makes a difference. Like, when we're taking the time to, you know, it sounds awful because it is, but we rip the tails and claws off, cook them separately. So, you know, all the tails get cooked together, so they get cooked at a certain time. All the claws get cooked together, and it makes a difference. It's an important part of the process is, you know, sourcing those ingredients. And I'm a firm believer of, you know, that is a cornerstone of what we do at Row 34 is like, we drive to Maine and pick up lobsters. I'll never change that. And if I do, it's, you know, I don't want to do it anymore if I have to do that.
And then obviously we see some fries and chips in these photos, and an audience member asks, chips or fries? What's more traditional?
I think chips is more traditional.
I could tell you why I do chips is on a busy day, we sell 200 lobster rolls in the Seaport, and we just couldn't keep up with getting fries, you know, because you need a fryer to do fries. So we just we do house-made chips, but you can make those all ahead and just put them on the plate. It was much quicker. That's why we did.
Yeah,
Practical.
and your fry, like, we have one fryer at Little Whale, and we have fried clams, fried calamari, fries, fish and chips,
same.
and it's like one little fryer, and we're doing, you know, 100-something lobster rolls a day out of there, but we do fries, and I'm like, maybe we should do chips.
Yeah.
Like, my manager's like, maybe we should do chips, and I was like, I don't know, I like the fries, and like, so it's like a tough thing. Like, it's your space and whatnot, but I think chips is actually probably more traditional.
Probably.
Yeah.
Candace also said chips are nicer if you have leftovers. So I guess that's a bonus.
It's like an hors d'oeuvre.
You shouldn't have
No,
leftovers.
that's true. That's true.
It should all be gone.
So I want to get back to that cost part of this. it can be very jarring for people the first time they have, maybe they go to a restaurant and get a lobster roll. The price can be shocking. Why is it so expensive?
Tons of.
I've talked about some of it
please.
already.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to go beat up another guy to catch lobster, like it gets expensive. It makes it challenging. It is a wild live creature that we're harvesting out of the ocean. There's a lot of costs associated with that. You're bringing it to the restaurant, we're cooking it, you're breaking it down. There's a lot of costs associated with that. So I always say, no matter how much it is, it's almost a bargain because it's kind of this miracle that we've gone out and harvested a wild animal out of the ocean, brought it to the restaurant, we've prepared it, and cooked it for you. We always, try to go as far as we can on the pricing. If we pay a certain amount, we have to charge a certain amount, and it's just really it's supply and demand like anything else. If the fuel cost goes up, if the cost of ropes go up, if the cost of bait goes up, the price of lobster goes up because all those things are associated. So it's this kind of really unique ecosystem that you're balancing, all of those things, and that's what kind of dictates the price of lobster. One thing that I've always said, like Maine and New England shouldn't supply the world with lobster, but we do, right? So lobster is exported all over the world, and that also makes it expensive. So if there's Chinese New Year, that is a big lobster prices go through the roof because they're exporting tons of lobster to China. Different parts of Europe at different times of the year export a bunch of lobster to Europe. So that plays into our local market, which I don't think that the guests see, nor should they. But it really affects how our market and what we're paying for lobster and what price we have to charge.
Yeah.
So, one thing, right? If you just look at either of these, right, the bread costs some money, right? The fries cost some money. That's a quarter of a lemon. Your ketchup costs some money. The plates cost money. The plates break. Like all these little other things. But the main thing is obviously like the lobster prices. Obviously, is what drives the price of your lobster roll, and those things. Chinese New Year. Bad winter, the weather's bad, they can't go out 4 days, what's going on. We always see in kind of like late winter, somewhere around March, early April, prices go ballistic. And we use Captain Martin's, they're out of Wellesley, Westford, for our lobster. And he buys from his cousin in Maine. So he buys whole, cooks them there, breaks them down, sends them to us. We don't have the capacity space to do that ourselves. But then sometimes in the spring, he's like, or late winter, he's like, I'm pricing it out and I'm doing it myself. And then I'm looking at buying meat that's already like cleaned by somebody else. And he's like, we're not making any money. So our supplier is buying the lobster and then giving it to us at cost because we're a good client. So we're pretty much at cost on lobster. And he's like, I'm making $0 on this and you are paying crazy, crazy price for lobster. And then you're supposed to sell it in a restaurant at some sort of a markup. So it becomes really, really challenging when people see like, oh, lobster rolls cost, $24 on the Cape in the summer, and it's, 3 ounces on a hot dog roll that's, stale. Like these are generous. They're big portions of lobster. It's all fresh. It's all, coming in daily or whatnot.
Yeah, we have a spreadsheet that says what we pay for it, and over the years we have done all the math, like our yields and how do we sell other product, make bisque or stock with a lobster, try to mitigate some of the costs that way. But, there's a spreadsheet that the chefs can look at me. Like, I paid this for lobster. This is what I need to charge for a lobster roll. And it's just a reality of doing business, right? We're in the business of buying and selling food, and lobster's a big part of that.
Yeah. And if the price if you marked up lobster like you mark up other stuff, people would, they would be like, well, what are you talking? It would be $100 or more. Like sometimes the lobster roll cost, you would have to charge $95, $100 plus for a lobster roll, and people would never pay that. Yeah,
and then in the springtime, it's insane. Because if you think about it, it takes a lot of the summer for the water to get warm, and it takes all of the winter for the water to get cold. So the coldest part of the water in the winter is not till March, April, where it's been a really cold winter. The ocean's really cold. The lobsters aren't moving. They're not catching very many. So the price is through the roof. The storms are coming through. Weather patterns are changing. I mean, I learned more about weather because of lobstermen than I ever did anywhere else. So it's, all of these factors. And then, we always, sometimes you're like, should we even put it on the menu? Are people going to be upset with us if you have to put a $68 lobster roll or a $72 lobster roll on the menu. Yeah. You know, and we end up putting it on. It's one of our most popular items. And there's a million other things to order. We do different rolls to try to give people other options, but that's just the reality of that seafood. I mean, it's expensive.
My fish guy will call me and he's like, got good news and bad news. And I was like, just give me the bad news. He's like, lobster's going up $5 tomorrow. And I'm like, but $5 a pound, right? And we're doing a 7 ounce plus lobster roll, right? It adds up.
The price has to go somewhere.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Like it has to go somewhere. And that's tough. Like you feel bad putting that on the menu or charging that. And like, you're like, should we take this off? And you can't. We did one time at Select. So at Select, we do lobster rolls during the day for lunch, hot and cold. And one time it was like, this is too expensive. I'm like, we can't charge this. Like, let's just take it off. And every single staff member, all the servers are like, we have to put lobster rolls back on. People want, like, everyone's asking for them. We're like,
this makes me so happy that someone else
I was like,
struggles that I do.
They were $68. And I was like, really? And he's like, they don't care. Like, people want them. And I was like, okay. I'm like, you feel bad selling it for that much, even though you're losing money. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. Anyone really complains, they're allowed to go work on the boat for the day.
Yes.
And then they won't.
After they get in their first brawl, that's when.
It's one of the toughest products to
you have to catch lobsters and then fight that guy.
Yeah.
And then you won't complain.
Kind of related to the sustainability part of this and fishing, can you talk about lobster prices and sustainability? This is a question from the audience, a very good one. Since the prices have been so high, is overfishing part of this? Climate change, warming waters?
I'll try to. I could speak about this ad nauseum because I get asked about these things a lot. So, this is my opinion, and like I said earlier, as you're thinking about what I say to you, I barely got through high school, okay? So, I have sat, you saw a picture of my grandfather and my dad. I sat at that table many nights and listened to those people who caught lobster for a living talk about, they're getting screwed by the price, bait's too expensive, the government's putting too many regulations on it. So it's a really hard industry. Maine lobster are the model for an industry that manages itself. They do an amazing job setting regulations, working with local and state and federal agencies to decide what works and what doesn't work for the lobster industry. Now, there is always friction there. That is the nature of that relationship. There always is going to be friction there. Out of the friction usually comes progress, but not always. We're kind of in the midst of a lot of that right now. So up until the last couple years, they have broken the record every year catching lobster. All right, 2024, they caught about 100. I'm going to say 100 or a couple million pounds less than they had the year before, and it was 24 was the lowest year on record in the last 15 years as far as lobster harvest. Okay, and everyone's like, well, the lobsters are going away. The waters are warming. The lobsters are going away. Well, that's not really true. They did that with 2.5 million less traps in the water. They did that with far less fishermen. We've lost about 1,000 fishermen over the last 10 years for lobstering. It's a really hard industry, and it's really hard to break into. There's a ton of regulatory stuff that goes around it. In my opinion, if you talk to lobstermen, and I do, there are lobsters out there. The challenges surrounding catching them have become more and more. It's not that they aren't there or that they can't catch them. We talk about right whales and rope. There's certain parts of not so much in-state fishery, Maine coast. There are parts of Maine where you're not allowed to put your traps in a certain spot as the right whales are migrating. They don't want right whales to get caught in traps. You're not allowed to fish as many traps as you used to. There is all of these things that go, and it's super expensive to break into. Think about buying a boat, a lobster trap to put bait, rope, buoys. That's $200 per trap before it goes in the water. And God forbid somebody cuts that rope, and so there is so much hurdles that these guys have to get over before you actually start catching lobster. So, my opinion, in talking to lobstermen and seeing this, the lobsters are there. Warming ocean, definitely. The climate is changing. There's no arguing that. Lobsters are migrating, but that is a very slow process. It is, within our lifetime, you might see it really affect. There's just less guys catching lobster than there used to be. There are a lot of lobsters. So the supply and the demand is always going to be there. I think it's going to get worse the average age of the lobsterman in Maine is about 62 years old. I mean, that is not sustainable. They have to start teaching it in high schools and vocational schools, lobstering and fishing as an industry, to kind of try to get that next generation to go. It is a really tough thing to do. So I think from a sustainability standpoint, I don't use that word when we talk about seafood in any of my restaurants. It is the dumbest word when it comes to talking about seafood. We make responsible decisions based on the information that we have. Sustainability rarely comes into it, because if you took lobstering is the largest fishery in the state of Maine by far. It accounts for 80% of all the fisheries combined. So cod, scallops, any other fish that they catch in New England, oysters, 80% of that is lobster. Well, that adds $500 million to the economy every year. And 33% of all employees in the state of Maine are, they call, what's the word they use? But they're kind of periphery employees of the lobstering industry. They sell bait, they sell ice, they sell rope. They work at a retail market. They work at a fish market. They drive a truck. That is a huge employer in the state of Maine. So when we talk about sustainability, you're not sustaining a fishery. That's an important part about it. You're sustaining an economy, a way of life. You're sustaining the local market. You're sustaining, the little, if you go up to Maine and it's this beautiful picturesque, and you go to Vinyl Haven, and if you've ever been to Vinyl Haven or up, Wacasset or any of those places where lobster is a huge part of it, tell them they can't catch lobster anymore, and think about what happens to those little seaside communities. What are we sustaining? Those lobstermen have worked really hard to sustain that way of life, because they know how important it is to the next generation. So, I hope I'm creating an opportunity for conversation rather than answering a question, because it's not a black and white answer. It never will be. But all of these things go into what is important in lobstering, what's important in that industry, and what's important in the state of Maine.
We have a quick fact check on some of the figures reported from Maine Public. In 2024, Maine lobstermen caught 86 million pounds, and fishermen set 285,000 fewer traps in the water in 2024 compared to the previous year.
I said 250, but 280.
Yeah, you're pretty good. Those facts are very staggering. Do you think there could be a world in which maybe it's not like lobster go extinct, but the lobster roll kind of fades out? Or do you think if people were willing to pay $68, it'll always be there?
There's going to be a supply and demand. I think that, I said this earlier, Maine should not be responsible for supplying the world with lobster. It just shouldn't. Lobster's a local thing, and it should support the local economy and the local restaurants and the local fishermen. It's like, capitalists, it's great. You're going to sell it to the guy who's going to give you the most money for it. Sometimes that's China. Sometimes that's Japan. Sometimes that's Europe. So if the lobsters are there, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, it sounds like the long-term issue might actually be the supply, right? If it's a very hard job, right? If people aren't moving into that field and starting, right? If there's not 24-year-olds on lobster boats, there's not going to be 35-year-olds on lobster boat. Like, the older generation will retire or be dead. And if there's not enough people actually doing that and harvesting lobsters, we're not going to have any supply. So, we might have to centralize, they might not be able to sell lobsters to all over the world. And you see that in other industries as well, right? Be it in the wine world, right? You see wines that, we don't really export these. These are sort of for, local consumption. And, the supply is not there. They don't have enough wine to sell all over the world. So we might kind of move into that. But, yeah, it's a really...
Yeah, the fear is there's a reason that Red Lobster don't own lobster boats. They would love to. And they would love to have all these lobster boats and control supply and demand and pay less than they do. It is a state-regulated fishery for the most part that has absolutely worked incredibly hard to make sure that, it is a way of life in Maine. It's a way of life on the seacoast, that can be there for generations to come. But it's also really hard to get in lobstering. Like I said, expensive. There's a lot of regulatory stuff. Maine has to do a better job of kind of introducing young people to it. It's also if you live in York, Maine, and you want to work on a lobster boat and that's your profession, you can't live in York, Maine. It's too expensive to live there. You have to live somewhere else. So all of those things combined have that is the future of the challenges in the industry. It's going to be really difficult I think like 10 years to see.
Yeah. And we've seen that in other parts of seafood as well. So striped bass is an example in terms of like regulatory stuff, where striped bass used to be sort of like, oh, it's in season in July. Like, fish striped bass has to be X, this big. And then every year they kind of made the regulations a little bit different, a little bit more kind of strict to try to preserve, striped bass populations or whatnot. And now people are just like, this is not worth fishing commercially, or it's a side thing. But, if that's one of your businesses or that's where you make money, maybe you're going to stop fishing, right? And maybe if lobster becomes too hard to work with, or, it becomes too expensive to actually operate a lobster boat, you're going to be like, I'm going to go work for Amazon. So that's the real thing. Yeah. So I think that's a huge concern kind of going forward.
I want to kind of shift to the experimentation area of this. Jeremy, I know you work with invasive green crabs at your restaurant. And things are very dire in many ways in these industries. I wonder what are some areas of experimentation or shifts you've made to kind of go with these changes?
I will just say, like, people love to talk about the bad news when it comes to seafood. Don't get caught up in that. That's the only thing they report. We're overfishing this. There's no more of that. Climate change. There's a lot of great things happening in the seafood industry. There's a lot of great local fish. There's a lot of great local aquaculture. So if you go to buy any fish, any seafood at any market, and you were standing there in front of the counter, feel really good about that. Like, there was so much work that got it from the water to the fish counter, and under intense regulatory issues and work and all those things. Don't ever be afraid to buy something that you like, or you're not doing anything wrong. The fish police are not going to show up and say you made the wrong choice. You should be excited about seafoods. So what we have done, though, is as humans, if we find something we like, we're great at eating all of it. We are fantastic at this. We did it with oysters 100 plus years ago. Every restaurant sold oysters and caviar because it was cheap, and they would usually give them away for free, and it was salty, and it would make you drink more. When we opened up Row 34 in the seaport, and we had to dig up the floor, we found a whole layer of oyster shells that were 100 years old that they used as construction material because there used to be so many oysters. So we loved oysters, and we ate them all. So the oysters went away. Aquaculture has brought oysters back. It's a great story. When we talk about invasive green crab, well, they're from Italy or from Europe. They're big in Italy, and they came over on ships. They, like rats or anything else, pigs came over from other countries to America, and now they're in our waterway, and they're part of our ecosystem. Well, they've been here over 100 years. I don't know how invasive they are anymore because they're here. But what we have done is, when we eat all of something, we look for something else to eat. So if I remember as a kid, mackerels, Boston mackerel, they're super common, inexpensive fish. Or pollock, if you've ever had pollock, that's a local, delicious fish. Well, when we would go fishing with my cousins and we go out and catch a bunch, my grandmother would steam them for the cat. That was what we fed the cat, mackerel and pollock. Well, Michael and I sell mackerel and pollock for real money now, so my grandmother would roll over. But what we have done is we ate all the cod, and so we had to go to something else, and then we ate all the haddock, and then we ate all the hake, and now we're pollock, and now we're on the green crab. So we find these things, and I think there's a lot of innovation that goes into, and creativity that goes into, I'm going to find a market for this. It's really abundant. If I always say to any fisherman, and my nephew catches green crabs, if you catch it, legally harvest it and bring it to me, I'll sell it. I'll figure it out. So we've done that. They do soft shell green crabs for us, like Maryland soft shells. The crabs molt and they're soft, and we fry them up whole, and we use them in stocks and soups. They're great, but there is a limit to that. It's never going to replace the lobster roll. It's just not. But it's a nice way to kind of diversify how we harvest the ocean and what we serve on the menu.
Yeah, there's two very good books kind of on those subjects from Mark Kurlansky. He's a great writer. The Big Oyster and Cod. And they're like, if you're into history or whatnot, just rip those. They're great. Get the book Cod. Yeah. And you can read it in a weekend this summer. Yeah. It tells you how cod shaped the world, why it's called Cape Cod. I mean, it's a really amazing. But both of those like kind of give you that perspective, and like Jeremy said, like we're really good at eating stuff, and we got, with Industrial Revolution, we got really, really good, probably too good at fishing it, to the point where, maybe we did deplete populations or whatnot, but there is other stuff that is good. It's delicious. It's available, and like we should be figuring out how to use that and utilize that in a way that's like he could sell that at a restaurant and it tastes good and people have a good time, and it's like we should be fishing more of this. So that just like takes a little bit of time for population to move on to that.
Eat a variety, like eat a bunch of stuff. Like have your lobster rolls, of course, but try different things. There's lots of great seafood out there. World War II, sonar invented, and then after World War II, they put it on fishing boats so they could see where the fish were and they could drop the nets. That was really the kind of tipping point in the ocean.
Wow. Monkfish is one thing that I've been trying more the last couple years, and I really like that. And it's been fun to see that popping up.
Yeah.
So we're gonna
all sorts of stuff.
Yes, all sorts. I'm gonna shift us to home chefs. That there might be some in this room, including me. How important is it like to cook the lobster? This is an audience question. How do you each cook your lobsters? And then this person says they've seen some boil, others steam, some add vinegar or wine. What's best?
So, depending on your atmosphere, right? If you're outside and you want to do a lobster bake, if you're, doing something super casual, right? You want the whole lobster. That's a way to do that. The best way, like Jeremy says, what they do is you split it and you cook it in parts, right? Because the claws take different time from cooking the tail. There's different sizes or whatnot. So the best way to actually get consistent and well-cooked meat is to cook the parts separately. But the kind of classic way, pot of water, lobster in, call it a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just don't rip lobsters apart in front of your dinner guests. I would not.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, but just boil or steam is fine. Less time boil, more time steam. Lemon in the water, if you want to, you can. Ultimately, I don't remember the exact time, but like a whole pound and a half lobster, pound and a quarter lobster takes like 12 minutes steam. Look online. There's a million guides. Just do it however you want. Like, don't get caught up in that process. Like, if you want to steam it or boil it, it doesn't matter. Just come up with a plan and stick to it. Don't let that be a hurdle. Like, oh, what should I put in the water? You don't have to put anything in the water. Just boil the lobster. It's going to be delicious. I promise.
One of my least favorite things is if you're at like a really fancy restaurant, a tasting menu, a multi-Michelin star, blah, 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 and they have lobster and they cook it in sous vide or whatever, and it's this little buttery perfect tail, and it's like, I'm like, I don't really like that. I'm like, I just want like a regular lobster that's like cooked. I'm like, that just tastes like the texture and how like a boiled lobster, like that just tastes good. And like the very fancy, like overworked, I'm like, it's okay. I'm like,
Don't overcomplicate it.
it's not something that like it's supposed to be simple. I don't know, like.
Yeah. I never order lobster anywhere out. Like, obviously, I get it in my own restaurant.
Or from your cousin.
Or for my cousin, I just go grab lobster. But, lobster is one of those really amazing seafoods that you can go to a roadside shack and eat lobster at a picnic table. And you could go to the fanciest restaurant in the country, and they're also going to have lobster on the menu. And both are great. It's just, your perspective, the environment really play a huge part of it.
So we're going to do some fast questions. Lightning round, if you will. I want you guys to just say the first thing that comes to mind when I ask. So, Michael, hot or cold?
Cold.
Jeremy?
Cold.
Okay. You guys are with Candace on that. Butter or mayo? I guess that kind of goes in hand.
Same question.
Yeah. Chips or fries on the side, or something else?
Fries.
Coleslaw.
Okay. What kind of bun?
Brioche.
All right. Should it be toasted?
Yes.
All right. Okay.
These are real softball questions here.
I know. Okay, well, maybe this one will be harder. What's the best drink to go with the lobster roll?
Beer. Yeah.
Okay.
Icy cold beer. Yep.
Awesome. And then I just have a few more kind of outside questions just from industry. On a night off from the restaurant, where are you guys going to eat? Or like, what is a dish that you eat?
we tend so we're sort of the same as I think everyone. You have a little rotation of places you end up going to, so we sort of end up at the same places all the time. I live right next to Parmesan. Their food's very good. It's super convenient. We walk the dog, and then we're like, let's go to dinner. It's 30 seconds away. So that's a great spot for us. We love Dovetail in Charlestown. They're buddies of ours. You really end up making a lot of friends in the industry, and you want to go and support them. Taberna de Haro, right down the road here on Beacon Street, nice Spanish spot. So, for us, it's you want to go see friends, and you get the same, a lot of people, we get the same thing at the same places all the time. So
I'm getting old. I don't go out that often anymore. I'm a big fan. I live Metro West. There's a couple places all owned by my chef friend, Dave Punch. Sycamore in Newton Center. He also has a place called Ginny's, which is like a pizzeria, which is incredible. And then he has a little noodle place called Little Big Diner. Those are kind of our favorites to go to that we don't have to venture back in the city. I was just telling Michael, every year my wife and I have birthdays at the same time. We always stay in town at a hotel and have lunch at Little Whale. We have for years and years. So that's one of our favorites. To go sit there. And yeah, I mean, there's, lots. Boston is an amazing food town. There's, when I came back here 20 plus years ago, there was a handful of chefs that were amazing, that were kind of pioneers. But if you think of all the variety of chefs and talent in the city is amazing now.
Well, thank you both so much. That brings us to time. Amy's going to come back on stage, but thank you all for joining us today. And yeah.
Thank you.